Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you. Sorry for starting a little bit late. But I want to welcome you again. I hope you all had a really blessed Ramadan. I know it went by so quickly, as it always does. And it was definitely, it's been a challenging time around the world. So I wanted to speak a little bit. Last time I talked about truth and about knowing your truth. And hopefully you had some time to also reflect and think about the things that you're grateful for here. But today I wanted to talk first a little bit about bravery, because I think bravery is one of those things, like truth, that we often recognize and we appreciate and we feel is wonderful, but we don't really think about. And I think it's one of these things that we really need in our time, especially when things are so difficult and so challenging. And bravery, is one of these qualities that, here I grew up in America, and bravery is not one of these things that is really that important when you're growing up in America, and, it's a community, it's an, environment where you're really just thinking about yourself and individual needs and what serves you best. But when I became a Muslim, what I really learned is that bravery is actually something that I think is transformative and that can change Muslims into really active, engaged members of society. So one of the things that was really beautiful when I was a young convert and I met Professor Abul Fadl, I learned very early on about bravery and how I really was not able to think beyond myself. Like I becoming a Muslim, I realized that I became part of something much larger than myself, and that what I did as an individual affected those around me. So it was really interesting because even in, I'll just tell a couple of stories that came to my mind when I was thinking about today is, when the professor and I first got married, I was, we were in Princeton, New Jersey, and oftentimes we would be going and thinking about grocery shopping or doing something very normal, and I would be very efficiency-minded and think, okay, well, I'll go here, and I'll go do that, and then I'll go there, and meanwhile, you should go there, and you should do that, and then we'll meet up back at home, because I was very efficiency-minded and wonderful. Of course, that made perfect sense, because that's how I grew up. But the professor would be like, no, let's just go do all of it together. And I'm like, why? So we can be together. So, we can enjoy this as a family. And I used to think that was so strange, because it's like, well, but it's going to take so much longer if we do it that way. Or, we would be like wondering, okay, well, I wonder if this store carries, a book or something that we were needing. So I'd be like, okay, well, let's just call them on the phone and we can find out if they have it. And he'd be like, no, let's just go there and see and if they have it. And I'd be like, why? We could save so much time. But, it was a mindset that was so foreign to me, but at the same time, like over the years, it really became a source of such beauty and wisdom, because it was a way to really, come on in, alaikum salam. It was a way to really, come on in, it's okay. And then maybe you can come sit over here. It was a way for us to connect, of course, as, a family, and really, learn about each other, and also, recognize and elevate the human aspect of being with others. So, you weren't just making it easy, making it fast, but you were actually taking time to develop a human interaction. And so that was really eye-opening for me and very beautiful. And, so this idea of being part of something larger, part of something, that's a bigger humanity, is so important, when it comes to being, an engaged Muslim. And especially in this day and age when we have so many things to be, like distracted by in our phones and, efficiency and all of that. But, and also, I learned a lot of really beautiful lessons about bravery just in seeing, and, sort of massive lessons, like when you watch Dr. Abul Fadl, he was, and I'm going to just take the opportunity since I'm a wife and I can brag a bit, he was really involved at this time. He was a PhD student at Princeton, and so, he was still, like making his way. But he was really involved in a lot of pro bono cases, helping Muslims who didn't have money, who were in horrible situations, and he had no problem thinking about getting involved, because if something struck him where this was just so unjust, he could not sit by, he would get involved. And for me as an American who is used to like, well, that's not my business, that's not something I want to get involved in, that's not something that I really want to deal with, that was eye-opening for me. And it was really empowering and powerful to see that, you know, he would jump up and speak his mind or get involved in cases, or even in writing, you know, calling out the Wahhabis for the first time. So he was the first scholar that called out Wahhabis for what they were doing when other people wouldn't even say that because they were too afraid. Or most importantly, and even to this day, being an academic, you know, in academia it's very difficult to be openly Muslim and to say that you're a practicing Muslim and a pious Muslim. And he has consistently done that with a lot of bravery before he had tenure and all the way through today. And I think that's a beautiful example. But so this is something, you know, for mere mortals like us who don't change the world in that way, bravery though is, you know, takes on a different feel. And I think it's even different for, you know, we have a lot of Muslim brothers and sisters who are having a lot of oppression and suffering all around the world, and they are forced to be brave because they have a situation that they have to survive. But for us here in America, where we are free and we can make choices and we can, you know, get involved in things that we want to or don't want to get involved in, I think bravery has a very different feel and requires a different kind of strength. So, you know, what does that look like for us? Maybe something as simple as if you're someone who always says yes, maybe saying no. Or if you're someone who doesn't like to get involved, maybe it's saying yes. It's speaking up for something when you feel like, well, this is something that someone else could do. No, you know, it's something that you can do. Or it's helping another person, or, you know, jumping out of your seat and, you know, helping an old lady, you know, walk across the street or whatever. I mean, it's literally having the energy to pull yourself out of your inertia and go and do something different. It could be something as serious as helping yourself get out of an abusive situation. I mean, we help many people who are in very bad situations, but they don't have the bravery to jump out of their situation, to try something different, to have a little bit of faith and change their situation. It could be being a convert, being a Muslim, or speaking about God without embarrassment, or speaking up for something that is morally right. And the thing that was really, I think, powerful for me as I found my way and became more comfortable in my skin as a Muslim, you know, over time, is seeing that I could do things without fear of embarrassment. And they were baby steps, you know, so that could be something as simple as, you know, one day I was driving out of Target and there was a car in front of me and I saw that someone had left a shopping cart and it was starting to roll down the street and it was going to hit the car in front of me. And I thought to myself, okay, you know, I could just watch this happen. It could be really kind of interesting. I could film it, post it. Or I could jump out of my car and actually grab that shopping cart and stop it from hurting anybody. And that's what I did. And then, or, you know, I'm oftentimes driving down and I see a dog. And if you know, we have lots of dogs. But I will stop my car in traffic and go and try and chase it. These are things that, you know, like, that was not part of me. But I, you know, like I have stories of the professor definitely making me stop and chase dogs down for like an hour. And I was like, no, this is crazy. But, you know, it's like these little baby steps teach you that you actually can, you know, like jump out of your inertia and do something small. And I even have another really beautiful story. We were at the mosque and there was, it was after one of these, I think it was a talk for Mayor Hattu, who had passed away. And there was a couple there. The wife was a lot older, and she was handicapped, and she couldn't get up, or, you know, they were worried about leaving her alone. And her husband had to go get the car. So I noticed this, and I offered to stay with the woman until he went to get the car, and then I walked her out and helped her into the car. Well, many years later, actually just recently, he came up to me and he said, you know, my wife passed away, but we always remembered that act of kindness because that really helped us in that moment. And this was, you know, in a mosque. And so for me, I was like really touched because, you know, I made a difference in someone's life. So the point is that, you know, you can take baby steps with bravery, But then if you take enough of those steps, they become a part of your empowerment and part of your attitude. And I think that if Muslims had more bravery, we could make amazing differences in our world. So that was one point. And I just want to say, Sharif, I always, after these talks, I always ask Sharif, okay, what could I do to improve? And he's like, lose the paper. So I'm like, okay, so today I'm going to be brave. I'm going to lose the paper. So, but I have one piece of paper. So I'm going to finish this, because this I had to read. So I wanted to take this opportunity actually to answer a question that I got, which I thought was really nice, which was important. So from someone who has been watching some Halaqas, he said, as a Muslim, if it's not too personal or too much trouble, since you're a woman and married to a scholar, there is an issue I would like to ask you about. As a Muslim, an issue that bothers me a great deal is the role of women and the allegations that Islam promotes male domination over women. I mean, verses in the Quran that deal with inheritance, women's testimony, or verse 434 about men being the column of women, sometimes make me feel that the Quran and Islam seek to promote a society where men are superior to women, both biologically and with regards to the social power they have, and women are essentially second-class, demeaned citizens. The fact that these verses are often used to justify the oppression of women sometimes make me feel as if God wants this to be the case, as he is the one who sent them down in the first place. There's also the fact that there are certain reports attributed to the Prophet or some of his companions where they exhibit a patronizing, demeaning, or discriminatory view of women, such as the hadith that says women are deficient in intelligence, etc., which makes me feel even worse about this, not to mention some of the misogynistic things said by past scholars. In summation, how do you as a woman overcome the issue of Islam being seen as oppressive towards women? Thank you in advance for your time. So I wanted to answer this because, certainly it's an important question that I think a lot of people ask. And, the short answer is the key to this is knowledge and faith, and I do believe bravery. So, I've been very fortunate to be married to a scholar who has written so much from the vantage point of God is beautiful, God is just, and with a firm conviction in that. And honestly, one of the best jobs I have as the wife of a scholar is getting to read all of his writings before they go to press. So over the years, I've read a lot, and it's really wonderful and empowering to know that whatever topic you're talking about, that when you have the view that whatever you're seeking in terms of God, it has to be beautiful, it has to be just, it has to be reasonable, and it has to make sense, for your heart and mind. And I've said that many times here about, this is what we do at the Usuli Institute. One is I've read enough to know that when you read these kinds of reports, that, you have to take into consideration the context, the circumstances, that you have to understand, when he says, well, God sent down these texts. Yes, but it's up to us as human agents to interpret those texts. And we can choose to interpret those texts in a beautiful, moral way, or we can choose to interpret them in an ugly way. And as the professor has written many times, the interpretations are really as moral as the agents that are interpreting them. And I think that, you have to do the work, do the due diligence to learn. And the thing that even, I'm not a scholar, as I've said, but now I've read enough to know that when I read something that is negative and ugly, that I am extremely suspicious. And I don't buy it. I believe that, it has to be reasonable, it has to be beautiful. There's enough evidence to support that. And certainly, if human beings can recognize that something is ugly and unjust and oppressive, God can certainly do that. On the flip side, if human beings can recognize that something is beautiful and loving and elevated, well, God can recognize that infinitely more so than us as human beings. So it's really up to us. Do we want to accept the interpretations that are beautiful, or do we want to accept the interpretations that are ugly? And I choose the ones that are beautiful. So, and then in terms of, faith, I had faith in God before I met Dr. Abul-Fadl, but the knowledge that I gained from learning more about my tradition helped me strengthen that faith and that conviction. And two of the things that I'll leave you with that were really powerful for me in understanding faith is the notion of benefit of the doubt and certainty. And benefit of the doubt is giving God benefit of the doubt that God wants what is beautiful and best for you. And second, certainty that God wants you to do everything in your power to elevate yourself, to be beautiful, to be yourself, to know what that truth is of who you are and what your purpose is here, to be the best of yourself and to be godly as opposed to the opposite. So that's really what we're all about. So with that, thank you very much.
Grace and I, we never even discussed what we're going to talk about before the Halaqa. So, in the past Halaqas, I've always listened to what she said and then sort of stole it, co-opted it, and this Halaqa, I'm struggling a little bit with the desire to plagiarize what she said and go on talking about bravery or stick with my original plan, and that is to talk about a particular surah in the Quran. I think I'm going to stick to my original plan. Do you remember when you held up traffic because of that homeless woman who turned out to have gone to law school? Torret was with us, and the woman who had gone to law school that's homeless.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Grace shocked my brother because she was talking to the woman, trying to understand her situation. She held up traffic and people were beeping, and she said, "I'm going to help her. You don't like it, go around me. That's just the way it is."
I learned that from you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. First, a couple of things before I move on to Surah Al-Rahman. There is no doubt that as Muslims we are living through a period that is trying, and all systems of thought, all cultures, all civilizations ebb and flow, and all go through a circle, a cyclical process of challenges, tension, and resolution. And during the times of serious tension and serious trials is an opportunity, but it's also a very serious challenge, because if we don't prevail, as Allah tells us and promises us in the Quran, that if you don't rise to the test, Allah can just make you wither away and replace you with another people. And so, unlike a considerable amount of Jewish theology, and unlike a considerable amount of Christian theology, in Muslim theology there is no entitlement to victory. Victory is not a tribal right that you attain as a promise from God. Victory is contingent on how you perform, whether you rise to the trials and meet the trials and tribulations that Allah puts before you individually and us collectively as a nation. And I do agree with Grace that it is at times when nations grow through the toughest tests. When you watch around the world and you see Muslims being killed all over, and being killed, unfortunately, with the involvement. There is not a single context in which Muslims are being killed in which there is no involvement by non-Muslims. Whether these non-Muslims are motivated by whatever theology or ideology that has motivated them, but in Yemen, in Libya, in Burma, you will always find an involvement by non-Muslims in the midst of Muslims spilling each other's blood. The conflict in Yemen is the involvement of the French and the Americans is well documented. In Libya, again, French and Americans. In Israel, involvement in Bahrain of American intelligence is well documented. Burma, of course, the involvement of Buddhists and so on. So this does present us with a challenge, and there was a recent event that I thought was really striking and cannot go without comment. There is a rather well-known spokesman, I forgot his name now. He's a well-known spokesman for the Israeli army. He speaks Arabic, and he is interviewed quite frequently on Al Jazeera, and every time he's interviewed, it's usually in the context of the Israeli army killing a group of Palestinians or arresting Palestinians or doing something to Palestinians. And he's always interviewed, and he is always unapologetic about whatever the Israeli army does. The Palestinians are criminals, they are always the aggressive ones, they're always the offenders, and he's extremely hawkish in what he says about the Israeli army and so on. Well, recently he came up with a video, a message to the Muslim world. Have any of you guys heard this? It's really fascinating. A message delivered in Arabic in which he praises Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, the founder of Wahhabism, and he quotes him primarily Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, and to a second extent Ibn Taymiyyah. The message basically is to tell Muslims that the great Muslim reformer Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab warned you that your true enemies are the Shia, and that the Shia are kuffar, and that they are worse than Jews and Christians. I'm quoting him, according to him, quoting Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. And he basically, so he's delivering that Wahhabi message to Muslims as embraced and internalized by the spokesman for the Israeli army. I thought that's fascinating. But it is truly a message to all of us. I mean, if you want to know the extent to which we have strayed from a just course, if a hawkish criminal, because someone like that is a war criminal by all measures, is embracing the Wahhabi message as something that he is promoting for Muslims and telling you that the Shia are your true enemies and that Muslims, meaning Sunni Muslims, should be only focused on the Shia as their sworn enemy, which happens to be, of course, the policy of Saudi and the Emirat all over the Middle East right now, and what they call the deal of the century, where they met with Jordan, Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates in an island in Saudi Arabia, and struck this deal that they call the deal of the century, in which basically the Palestinian issue is marginalized. Israel gets to keep Jerusalem, and we're hoping to resolve the whole conflict this way. The reason it was quite striking, because it reminded me of something that I wrote in the 90s when I was working on the authoritative and authoritarian, and I was studying Wahhabi ideology and the way that it has always interlinked and assimilated itself and its interests to the interests of British imperialists, and it's rather disinterested attitude towards the occupation of Palestine and the expulsion of Palestinians from their home, while being remarkably preoccupied by the Shia in Iraq and in Saudi Arabia, and in the history of Wahhabism, instituting several genocides against the Shia, but completely disinterested in what colonial powers were doing in the Middle East. And as we know, if you've read Reasoning with God or you've read parts of Speaking with God's Name, that the overlap between the interests of imperialists in the Middle East and Wahhabis is just stunning. And the hawkish is representative of the Israeli army adopting the Wahhabi message as his own. If Allah wanted to send you a message as to what is right and wrong, and what we are, how we are messing up as an ummah in our modern world, God could not have sent a clearer message. I mean, if you have any prejudices against the Shia, all you need is to hear something like this and realize that you're on the wrong course. And if you do not realize the importance of Jerusalem and the importance of the Palestinian issue for all Muslims and for the future of Islam, all you need is to listen to the hawkish criminal representative of the Israeli army to reorient your understanding towards the world. Allah is not going to bless us as an ummah as long as we refuse to take a stand towards just causes and continue to be on the wrong side of history. And when the representative of our two holy sites, and just incidentally, I don't buy this thing about abandoning Wahhabism and all that, even if they liberalize certain social policies, the essential core of Wahhabism, which is extremely authoritarian and autocratic and despotic towards all Muslims, because essentially it teaches that you should concern yourself with hating the Shia and hating the bid'ah, ahlul bid'ah, the people who make bid'ah, however you define them, and not concern yourself with democracy or human rights at all. That's core to Wahhabism. And that you should just, your attitude towards whoever governs you should be strict obedience. And that revolution is one of the gravest sins. In fact, recently they have declared the entire Arab Spring as the connivings of Satan, and that it was all demonic from beginning to end, and so on. You cannot separate your own salvation from your ability to see what is ethical and what is moral and what is just. And if things blur in your vision and in your sense of, as we'll talk about in a second, in your ability to see the balance that is required for justice on earth, then know that you do not have Allah's blessings. Allah's blessings is withdrawn from those who fail to see justice, or those, and again we'll talk about this or those who are oblivious towards justice. simply are disinterested.